Welcome back to part 2 of my week 2 update for my Horror Mayhem picks. This is going basically from May 8th up to May 14th. Over those 7 days, I read 10 stories. The video was running a little long, so I'm breaking it into 2 parts. This is the second part. And again, Horror Mayhem, just to remind you, if you're only seeing this video, is a monthly event started by the Bookish Bryants. And this year's theme is Decades of Dread. So the focus is on 250 pages or less short horror novels, stories, novellas, novelettes. I'm sticking to short stories because that's my jam for classic horror. And this video is the second part, the second half, the back half of what I read last week. So without further ado, let's get back into the second section, the second part of my reading for last week. I went back into the Kindle for another British Library Tales of the Weird collection. This one's called, this one was from the Nightwire and Other Tales of Weird Media. And this one is edited by Aaron Worth. And so the first story I read from this collection is by Marjorie Bowen, who is well known for her creepy and ghostly tales. And this is called They Found My Grave, and this was published in 1938. And this follows two mainly one aristocratic woman, 30s Art Deco woman, pretty wealthy socialite. She has a friend who's been dragging her to these kind of seances at this medium's house, the kind of dingy place that the main character doesn't really like to go to. She's very skeptical until one of these readings where the medium uses, contacts the spirit world supposedly, and through the phonograph, ghostly voices come out. And one time this voice comes out and starts speaking in French. And the main character, she speaks French well, and she understands what he's saying and starts translating it. But she's so transfixed by this voice. It's a vile, deep, masculine, and very hostile and evil-sounding voice. And despite herself, this woman is fascinated and kind of repelled, but equally compelled to keep coming back. And eventually her other friend that had pulled her into this circle of, people who are into parapsychology and spiritualism, she kind of fades away and does her own thing because she realizes it's not healthy. And so does the narrator, the lead character. She knows that it's probably not a good idea, but she just can't help herself. She's fascinated by this guy, and she starts using her money not only to continue to go and pay for these kinds of readings where get in contact with this spirit voice in French, but she also spends a lot of money trying to find where is his grave, because he keeps talking about, my grave is, I was a very well-known and respected professor, and my grave is in a beautiful crypt, and people visit it constantly and put flowers on it and all that. And she eventually finds out that the opposite is true, and that the spirit is, he was a very lesser, ignored, nobody liked him. His grave is all decrepit and not covered with anything. And she calls him out during one of these readings. And he's increasingly angry and warning her, don't you say the truth. But this just shows a little sting in the tail at the end of this one. You're sometimes better off not knowing, not getting into this kind of spiritualism situation, because it could be dangerous. Let's put it that way. Quite a good story, quite interesting, and well written. Next, I went back into the Weird Tales, the Fantastic Stories Present the Weird Tales Super Pack Volume 2. And this was for a 1942 story by Fritz Leiber called Spider Mansion. Now, this was actually the first story I read last week before I got into the other ones. It's not the first chronologically, but it's the first I read, I encountered during the week. Kicked off my week, and it's a good one. It has quite a bit of, unfortunately, and I was already surprised with a writer of Fritz Leiber's caliber, but it was quite racist overtones, and also very kind of old-fashioned and how should we say it, anti-little people, called midgets in this story, sentiments. But it's also a really juicy, gothic, horror-filled, creepy, fast-paced tale. So it has a lot of things going for it, but it has this kind of nasty undercurrent of racism and anti-littleism, I guess. I don't know how you would refer to it there. But the story starts on a dark and gloomy night. A man and his wife are driving. They're on their way somewhere else, but the weather is really bad. And they realize that they're not far from the house of this former associate that they know, who was a midget, was under 4 feet tall. Not the most pleasant person, but they know him and they know his house is nearby. So this couple drive up to the house of Malcolm Orne. Malcolm Orne is the midget, the little person who they know from past encounters, and the narrator's wife Helen can't resist a shiver of revulsion about him being a little person. Ugh. It's kind of very outdated and a weird, uncomfortable sort of aspect to the story. Anyway, when they come up to the house and knock on it, there's some kind of trouble at first, where the African-American servant is scared of something and almost blows the wife away as he shoots a shotgun blast through the door when they come out, and he's taken aside by Malcolm Orne. But this time Malcolm Orne is no longer a little person. He's now towering at almost 7 feet and massive build, and he greets them in an over-enthusiastic manner, very courtly manner, and invites them to come in and stay. And they come in, and he gives them a room, and he asks them to come down for supper. And he looks, I can tell from your look that you're shocked, but it is indeed me, and I'll tell you all about the transformation and what it means at dinner. But there's this kind of mocking and sinister undercurrent being delivered through his seemingly nice or kind and hostly facade. And of course, later they meet this man's wife, who can barely speak and seems petrified. And there's weird noises outside and skitterings, and the African-American servants are extremely frightened about something. And what it goes from there. From the title of the story, Spider Mansion, I think you can guess what might be lurking around out there. Essentially, the Orms, I'm sorry to say, essentially, Orm had an older brother who was sorry for his dwarf sibling and was trying to come up with a kind of growth hormone that would help affect him. And obviously it worked. He had tried it on many other animals in the meantime, but Orm had his own plans for not only humanity overall, but his two recently arrived guests. This is a wild story with lots of pulpy, violent, gnarly, beastly stuff going on, only marred by the racism and other attitudes of the time. I'm rather surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see them in a 1920s Weird Tales, but 1942 seems a little odd to still have that kind of sentiments being so calmly presented. So that one's a cool story, but with your mileage will vary on whether you can stomach some of the the off-color remarks that are put in there. Usually that stuff doesn't bother me too much, but I did notice it standing out a bit in this story. Obviously, it's, we don't like it in this day and age, but, stories were written in their time. You have to take that into account. But this was a little unnecessary, I think. Okay. Next, I returned to the Circles of Stone collection I mentioned before, the British Library Tales of the Weird. And I read Minuke. It's spelled Minuke. This is by Nigel Kneale. Nigel Kneale, if you're a fan of British television, is famous in Britain for his creepy, either horror or science fiction stories. He wrote Quatermass in the Pit, all the Quatermass movies. He wrote The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. That was a movie made by Hammer based off of his original teleplay, The Creature. He wrote the famous ghost story, The Stone Tape, which was made into a television film in the 70s. He did a lot of work for TV, including a series called Beasts, where he wrote 6 teleplays, and one of them especially is Little Barty's Party. It's really creepy and scary. So the guy knows how to write, and he knows how to write in very vivid and effective fashion. And this story is, imagine this was written in 1949. It looks like Minuke or something, but it was kind of a childishly playful take on Minuke. And it's about a family. So it's narrated by a real estate agent who's trying to show unnamed listener that he's narrating the story to. All you heard about the background of this property, I'm sorry about that, but let me fill you in on the details. And obviously I won't be renting you this property, but you might find it interesting. And it's out in this area, and apparently there were some ancient stones. Who knows what was buried down there? Ancient Viking gods or pagan druids or something. But on this, there was a series of cottages built in this area, and the one cottage that this young family moves into and calls Minuke is particularly built over this stone grave site, possibly grave site. No one's dug it up to know. No one's likely to because of what happens next. Imagine Poltergeist, a good 35 years or so before it was actually made. The family starts to experience some really strange and increasingly hostile poltergeist sort of activities and sounds and scary things. And eventually things escalate, and the real estate agent is trying to figure out what's going on. And what happens after that, it gets increasingly serious. And let's just say that the family doesn't stay in that place for very long for fear of their life. So that's quite an interesting and spooky little tale. So again, moving forward in time, I read a story by J.B. Priestley called Uncle Phil on TV. And this was in the Night Wire and Other Tales of Weird Media collection. And this one was from 1953. And of course, 1953, J.B. Priestley was a British author. 1953, the Queen's coronation, Queen Elizabeth II. This is when a lot of British people didn't have a TV. They were just starting to get a TV. TVs were pretty expensive, fairly new technology in post-war Britain. And this revolves around a family finally coming into some money to get a TV and what happens after that. So this is a very funny and sardonically black humored sort of story, really skillfully told. Priestley is not particularly well known for his horror fiction. He wrote, mostly, I believe, literary fiction and more straight mainstream fiction. But he did try his hand at some horror stories, by all accounts, and this is one of them. Now, Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil. Who's Uncle Phil? Well, it starts with a extended family. There's Mom, she's like the main character, and then a couple of her daughter, her son-in-law, George, her husband, I guess her husband's brother, Ernie, or Ernest, and a young, maybe early 20s son, and a 20-something, later 20s daughter. And they're all contemplating what to do with the 150 pounds that they've collected as insurance money they've collected for Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil passed away recently, and his insurance was for 150 pounds. Now, Uncle Phil was not a particularly nice man. He always had kind of his head bent to one side, looking, with kind of nasty, glittering eyes out sidelong at the other people, making sarcastic and kind of nasty, contemptuous remarks to them. But they, housed him as a relative and put up with him. He was the brother of Mum, not well liked, but needed to be taken care of. And he had a heart condition. And for some reason, on the day he died, his pills that he needed when he started to feel heart palpitations come on that might lead to a heart attack, He would have to reach for his medicine and take that quickly. His medicine was not to hand. He wasn't well enough to spring up to the mantelpiece to get it, and he died. And the doctor takes the family to task about this, but he doesn't have any suspicion of foul play or anything, figuring it was just an accident. So the family all are relieved to not have Uncle Phil with them anymore, and they discuss what should they do with his legacy of 150 pounds, which was a fair amount of money in the 50s, for a working class family like this. They decide, it's George's idea. George is very voluble, take charge sort of son-in-law, and he says, let's get a TV. We can all enjoy the TV. It's something you're getting for the whole family, and then everyone can sit down and enjoy all these new programs. And they're all excited about, we can watch sports, and we can watch fashion shows for the women and sports for the guys, and movie, kind of dramas for both of us, for all of us, etc. And so they go and get the TV. They bring it in. Everyone's all excited. They gather around. But at first, not everyone notices, but Mom especially notices, and her daughter, eldest daughter, George's wife, notice. They see someone on TV who looks a lot like Uncle Phil, giving them a sidelong look. And increasingly, they see him more and more. And Mom is quite alarmed, and she is no longer very happy about the TV. And all the other men especially are poo-pooing, oh, there's nothing there. I thought I saw a guy who looked like Uncle Phil, but I'm sure it's Uncle Phil's on our mind. We're just focusing on him because of his death. We have the money to buy the TV. Of course, we're going to maybe see someone who looks like him. But it keeps happening and keeps happening. And eventually, Uncle Phil starts talking directly to the family members watching. It's a very interesting idea and a well-done story. The last story chronologically I read was by Lisa Tuttle, and this is from 1980. And for this one, we jump back into the Circles of Stone anthology. And this one is very directly linked to Stone Circles. And this is called Where the Stones Grow. Now, I haven't read much Lisa Tuttle in the past. I'm aware of her. I know she's written quite a few horror stories, short stories. I'm sure she's written a lot of other things, but I'm mostly familiar with her horror work. And this is a very well done story. And it's from the point of view, the protagonist's name is Paul, and it kind of jumps back and forth between two timelines. When Paul was a young 8-year-old boy, he saw his father killed, or right after his father was killed, apparently crushed by some stones. Now, the family was vacationing in England, some standing stones, right? They were in this English coastal village, and they're walking up this hill, and this old man, local villager, and his dog are walking with them and showing them the path past these 3 standing stones. The locals call them the 3 sisters. And the Paul's father is fascinated by them, and was this used for some sort of ancient rite, and what's going on? And the local gentleman is a little bit, taken aback and we don't talk about that. We don't spend much time here. They're called the 3 sisters, etc. So they learn a bit more about these stones, and apparently the local legend is that 3 young women didn't follow the rules. They were misbehaving and frolicking in the water up where the stones grow, basically. And they, as punishment, the gods or whoever turned them to stone. And occasionally they still move as stones down to the seaside and bathe. And the legend is if anyone sees them move, they die. And so Paul's dad is just like, whatever, stones don't grow. This is fascinating, but I don't believe what's going on. Anyway, or believe this legend, I want to find out more. So apparently next day, Paul's dad has disappeared, and Paul's mom says, Paul, go find your father. He's up there by the stones somewhere. And Paul goes up, finds his dead body between the stones. And as he sees the body, he sees one of the stones move and go back to its position. And of course, he's highly traumatized by this. And flash forward to years later, maybe he's a man in his 30s, I'm guessing. He's been sent by his company down into Arizona. He's finally bought his own home. He's excited to have his own home. He's packing into this, his unpacking when he moves into his new house, and he rolls out a rug and he sees these little white pebbles, and he realizes with a shock that these are somehow some remnants of the stones from England that somehow were brought back to the States. And he's, freaked out by this, and he takes the stones and he throws them in the kind of weed-choked lot behind his house, empty lot with just a lot of weeds and brush back there, and he tosses the stones back there. Now Paul is haunted by this because he remembers the legend that anyone who sees these stones move is going to die, and he did see one of those stones of the three sisters move when he was a child, and he can't help feeling that something bad might happen. Later, he's continuing to try to, make this new home comfortable for himself, and he turns and looks out back. He's out doing something in his backyard, and he sees all of a sudden 3 stones. They're not as big as the three sisters back in England, but they're about 4 feet high, a little more than a meter high, and they weren't there before. And now he's pretty worried. Very interesting story, really good sense of mounting dread. Lisa Tuttle does a fine job. Anyway, that wraps up my Horror Mayhem Week 2 update. 10 good stories. I enjoyed nearly all of them, other than the very vague and unsatisfying Mackin story, The Ceremony. But all the other stories, including the other Mackin story, The Lost Club, I enjoyed very much. The highlight for me was definitely Pickman's Model by H.P. Lovecraft. Damn, that was a good story. Okay, thanks for watching. Sorry if this has gone on and on a little long. I like to give you a little taste of these stories without spoiling them, hopefully, and hope you will check some of them out. Hope everyone else is enjoying your short novel or story reading for Horror Mayhem. And I'll see you again next week with some other stories that I have read, including hopefully some from some decades I haven't gotten to yet, like the 60s and the 70s, and maybe even the 90s or the 2000s. We'll see. And I won't rule out some older stuff as well. Okay, thanks a bunch. We'll see you in the next video. Enjoy your reading and take care.